If you're still not sure if you should take your family member out of their senior's home, I found a decision aid that might be helpful. If you haven't watched before, my name is Dr. Nicole Didick. I'm a medical doctor, a geriatrician. I'm an expert in aging, and my purpose here on The Wrinkle is to provide information that you need to age well or to help your family members to age well. A topic that's come up recently is whether or not your family member should move out of their senior's home. This is something that's being talked about quite a bit because of the COVID-19 outbreak. Unfortunately, there have been outbreaks in long-term care homes and retirement homes, and many of them have had really tragic consequences. You might be worried about what could happen to your family member if such a thing happened at the senior's home that they live in. But the decision about whether or not to move your family member to come and live with you, for example, is very complex. I found a decision aid that's prepared by a team at the University of Ottawa that could be very helpful. I'm going to leave a link to it down below in the description box. A decision aid isn't medical advice, but it gives you kind of a framework to work through that might help you to clarify some of your thinking and might be helpful in coming to a decision. You've probably done something like this before when you were facing a big decision, making a pros and cons list. So this decision aid kind of gives you a bit more of a framework to do something like that. So the main question that this decision aid is trying to help with is, during the COVID-19 pandemic, should I go live with a family or friend or stay in my retirement home or assisted living home? So to start with, it's important to clarify where the person is actually living and who they would move in with if that were the decision. It's also important to know who can legally make the decision. So if the person who's living in the retirement home isn't capable, then their substitute decision maker might make that decision for them. The first step in trying to decide about whether or not to move out is thinking about how much help the person needs. So someone who's living in an assisted living home might be able to completely look after themselves and might have chosen to live there just because they don't want to do cooking or yard work anymore. But there are people living in retirement homes who need quite a bit of help. A lot of people living in retirement homes could probably be a good fit for long-term care homes too. So they might need quite a bit of help with what we would call their personal care or basic activities of daily living. It's important to take an inventory of that to get an understanding about whether your needs, if you're the person living in a retirement home, could be met outside of the retirement home. So the framework provides a little checklist where you can look at thinking about some of those activities of daily living and whether or not help is needed and how much help is needed. It's also important to think about the person's memory and their responses to difficult situations. It's important to be honest about how much these issues are affected and how that might affect a move. Take stock of what any other special care needs might be present. So for example, if somebody needs oxygen or if they need a visit from a wound care nurse or another specialist, is that the kind of care that could be provided in the friend or family member's home? Because a lot of services are restricting how readily they can go into another home. But if they're already going to the retirement home, those services might still be available. So that's important to find out. Think about the environment that the person in the retirement home would be moving to. Is there the type of personal help? So are there people around that can provide that help? Is there equipment that might be needed? What's the environment like? If you use a walker, will it fit in that space? Are there the grab bars, for example, that you're used to using? So all of those practical things need to be taken into account. And the decision aid does run through them, again, in sort of a very helpful checklist. And here's the step that could be the most challenging. Step 3, what reasons to choose each option matter most to you? This is one of the pillars of geriatric care. What matters most to the older adult? And that's where it's not really right for us to project what we think matters most onto the older person. It's what matters most to the older person themselves. When we're older, for example, we might accept a certain amount of risk because we prioritize another aspect of our lives that's important to us. So, for example, if we want to stay in our retirement home because that's where our pet lives and our pet couldn't come with us if we had to move, then that would be factored heavily into the decision. So the step 3 in the decision aid kind of runs through some of that. And again, it reminded me a lot of kind of that list of pros and cons that we often use when we have a difficult decision. In step 4, after you've thought about what your needs are, what the environment would be about where you would be moving, and what are the important goals, fears, and values that help you to prioritize those factors, it's important to just run through whether or not you need any other information to make that decision. Is there anyone else that you need to consult? Do you need to talk to a healthcare provider, for example, and find out what they think about how a move could meet your health needs? And finally, in step 5, it's time to think about what are the next steps. If there's somebody else that you need to talk to, or the steps that you need to put in place to actually execute a move. Again, this kind of decision aid is not really meant to be medical advice, but it's just a tool that a person could use along with their family and their healthcare team to make a decision about whether to stay in their retirement home or assisted living facility or make a move. I think these kinds of frameworks are very helpful because this framework could be applied to many other decisions. It could also be applied to, if you're living at home and trying to decide if you should move into an assisted living facility. This kind of decision aid can be helpful in thinking about what your needs are, what the environmental needs are, and what your values are. It's kind of like some advanced care planning around a very specific issue. Let me know what you think of this tool, whether or not you would use it, or if you have used it, I'd love to hear how it went and whether it was helpful. I'm very thankful to the team at the University of Ottawa for developing and sharing this decision aid. Thanks so much for watching. Stay well, and we'll see you next time on The Wrinkle. Or if you'd like to keep watching, you can just click on the video that's being shown on your screen right now.